Hey, Faithfulness! So, welcome back to Faithful Friday. For the first case for this week, we are going to Michigan. This case, it was kind of a scandalous. I thought it would have been a lot more scandalous considering that our killers worked at a nursing home and considering how vulnerable our victims were. If you have heard this case, definitely let me know because I thought it would have been more well known, but apparently it's not. And for this case, we do have two serial killers. So I'm going to give basically like a life introduction into both of them, like how when they were born, their childhoods, what's publicly known about them, and then I'm going to proceed into our killing spree. And so with that being said, I'm gonna quit my rambling and let's go and get started. So Catherine May Wood, which we're gonna call her Kathy because that's what most sources were calling her. She was born May 7th, 1962. Her mother was a stay-at-home mom because that was very common at the time, while her dad was apparently serving over in Vietnam. And then, as many soldiers apparently did after a war, especially as traumatic as Vietnam, he would sadly become abusive. And then Kathy was also said to begin bullied at school. Alright, so when Kathy is like 14, she starts apparently dating this girl named Debbie, and so apparently, okay, if you do the math, when she's like 14, this is like 1976. Apparently, lesbian relationships aren't as well accepted as they are now. And so she's hiding this relationship from her parents. Her mom apparently is okay with it because she would go over to Debbie's house like a lot. Because remember, she has this abusive father. And the mom is okay with her going over to the friend's house because you're getting away from the abusive father. But the mom, understandably, is under the assumption that Debbie's actually David. So she pretty much, I guess, lied to her mom and said that Debbie was actually a boy. So so the mom would go over to the house apparently to pick Kathy up one day. And then the mom, understandably, wanted to meet what she thought was David because, you're dating my daughter. And Debbie's mom was like, I only have Debbie. I don't have David. So then, of course, the mom apparently demanded that Kathy cut off the relationship pretty much right then and there. And then there's other sources saying that she lied to her mom and said that she was manipulated and she genuinely thought that Debbie was a boy. So then at 17, said that she marries a man named Kenneth Wood. So that's where she gets the last name Wood from. She met him. They got pregnant out of wedlock. Went and had a shotgun wedding because that's what you did back then if you got pregnant out of wedlock. And then apparently she starts using alcohol after this. Kenneth says, I guess, like, to get her off the alcohol, like, become a nurse, so just do something useful. So then in 1985, she starts working at Alpine Manor in Walker, Michigan, which is where our story takes place. Like, all of our murders will take place. So then here she meets Gwendolyn Gail Graham in 1986, which is the second half of our serial killer pair. Apparently Gwen, we're gonna call her Gwen, even though her legal name's Gwendolyn. She was born August 6th, 1963 in Texas. Apparently, her parents believed in the whole, let the baby cry it out, so she had to self-soothe. She was also said to have, unfortunately, came from an abusive childhood. There would be a dog that she really loved, because, kids tend to love animals, as they do. And apparently the dog would apparently scare a horse that they had. So, they had horses. Horses ain't cheap. And it didn't say how severe, whether the horse broke a leg, but I guess that pissed the dad enough off to where Gwen had an older brother, told the older brother, go kill the dog. Simply just for scaring the horse that they had. So I guess he really either liked this horse or really hated the dog. Maybe even both. And so then the brother, after basically putting the dog out of his misery, has to bury said dog. And then once it gets to the point to where the dog is pretty much bones, at least that's what's left over this dog, Gwen goes back and puts apparently his teeth in a box. Because she really liked this dog. And then she moves to Michigan to start doing nursing school. And then when she's 20, she's dating this woman who's 28, and apparently her name is Fran. That's all we have on her. Her name apparently is just Fran. And then Fran apparently is the one who got her the job at Alpine Manor. And this is where she meets Kathy. Hence, this is where the two come together. And so Gwen and Kathy apparently they started dating in September 1986. Remember, Kathy's married. So Kathy apparently leads Kenneth and gives full custody of their daughter, because apparently they had a girl, to Kenneth, and Gwen left Fran. And so it wasn't apparently all happy. Apparently they would actually fight, I guess not fight, but they would argue apparently a lot, including at work. They moved in together, so obviously, they're arguing in a place at home and at work. So it's apparently pretty toxic. Gwen had apparently mentioned to Kathy that she wondered what it would be like to kill somebody. Kathy apparently would hide some of the patients, because like I said, it's a nursing home, so these are elderly people where they're living their final years. She would hide some of the patients in just random places of Alpine Manor when it was mealtime. And apparently a lot of these patients had dementia and Alzheimer's, which obviously forget memory and shit. so they wouldn't be able to tell like who did it, and also it would just be and also it would be assumed that they just like wandered off on their own, because apparently, especially with the Alzheimer's, apparently that's a thing. People will wander off if they have it. So apparently, Gwen would even hide under the bed to scare patients and even other nurses. And then apparently there was also that the parent would also like just bang on the windows at night. And understandably, these people are like scared for their lives. And then apparently the other nurses would complain, but nothing was ever done because they were seen as reliable and willing to work overtime. Whereas apparently most of these nurses weren't even willing to work overtime, so the fact that they were willing to, we can't exactly let them go. So on January 18th, 1987, we kind of have the first known murder of Gwen and Kathy, and apparently she was a 60-year-old woman with Alzheimer's. She was born November 9th, 1926, and her name was Margaret Chambers. And then apparently Gwen apparently smothered her while Kathy was a lookout, because, you know, there's always a damn lookout for these crimes. And then another nurse apparently had came in and found the body, and she was ruled natural causes because of her age and the fact that she had Alzheimer's. And then apparently after these two had killed, I guess after Gwen technically had killed Margaret, they wouldn't have sex in the closet. So the two, I guess they decided that was very fun for them, so they decided, oh, we're going to go kill again. Except we're going to start over with A. So I guess they were going to do the ABC murders, but they were like, we already killed Margaret. Her name starts with an M, so how about we spell out murder? Hence why these murders are known as like what I call the Scrabble Murders. But as you can imagine, the next letter in murder is like U, and U is kind of a hard name to find unless it's like Ursula. Yeah, that's like the only, you know, like you don't really see like a U as much. You'd be lucky to find one, and luckily they couldn't find one, so they're just like, we're just gonna start killing random people that we don't like. And then February 3rd, so I guess they took a little gap between here and between the murders. There was a nurse that would find 95-year-old Myrtle loose. She would find Myrtle loose with blood coming out of her nose. Keep in mind, she's like 95. So then Myrtle was born February 10th, 1891. She had 2 kids. Apparently she got born in like 1906, and she'd been married for like 65 years. Her husband had died in like 1971, so she was sadly a widow. And the thing that I hate about this is apparently his last wish, because apparently I guess like he knew that elders was not getting treated right in these nursing homes, especially since back then, because they didn't have the regulations that we have today. He literally, apparently his dying wish was to make sure his wife, regardless of her age and condition, make sure she is never put into a nursing home. So I guess her husband knew, like, but unfortunately she's in this nursing home. So then apparently the nurse thinks nothing of it. Just clean, I guess she thought it was like a regular nosebleed, because nosebleeds do happen. And just went about her day. Apparently Myrtle was actually said to keep to herself. However, she did have a son. Remember, her son's name is Ted. And apparently whenever he visited, she was said to have like relaxed. Which, I mean, again, that's your son, you know who that is. Obviously you're going to be able to relax around your kid. And then apparently a week later, Myrtle was found dead. So apparently when she's found dead, there's like mucus on her nose, which I would like to assume that's hers, but again, didn't specify. She has bruises on her, and I'm imagining these are like pretty severe bruises, and apparently a wet washcloth next to her. Her death is ruled natural causes because, you know, she's 95. What else could it possibly be? And this was despite an examination that was done on her a couple of days earlier, where apparently even though she was like one of the oldest people in this facility, apparently she was said to have been like in one of the best health. So apparently there's this guy named Don. Doesn't give a last name, just Don. So we don't even know if that's like his real name or not, or short for Donald, whatever. Anyway, so Gwen and Kathy apparently confessed the murder to Don, and Don doesn't believe it. And so they decide to show him a sock that belonged to Myrtle. So they're for keeping basically items of the victim, I guess like a trophy, as serial killers often do. And Don still didn't believe it. Then on February 16th, a nurse named Sean would apparently go in and check on a 76-year-old with Alzheimer's named Mae Mason. And Mae Mason apparently was born on February 2nd, 1908. So she would meet her husband apparently while working, because even though it wasn't traditional for women to work back then, she did. And I guess because, you know, you gotta provide for yourself if you're not married. So yeah, so she met her husband while working. They moved to Grand Rapids, which is in Michigan. They get married, obviously. And then apparently he's put into a nursing home in like 1963, and he dies like 2 years later. So she's also a widow. Apparently, the husband had apparently developed Parkinson's, and that's why he was put into the nursing home, because it got to the point where the family just like couldn't take care of him. At 65, Mae decides we're going to start a whole new career in interior design, because I guess that's something that she just really wanted to do. And then the family decides we're going to put Mae in a nursing home after apparently it got to the point to where she started forgetting shit, and she apparently put some underwear into an oven to dry it and almost burnt the house down in the process. So then this nurse named Sean, apparently he gets like a washcloth and he is like trying to, I guess, like basically clean her up with this washcloth because, they can't clean themselves, And apparently he gets to her face, she starts freaking out, is over fighting him, trying to defend herself. And then, like I said, remember the victims before May, they were but pretty much smothered with like the washcloth. So it's believed that Gwen and Kathy actually came in prior to Sean coming in and tried to kill her, but they were unsuccessful. Hence why she immediately tried to defend herself. Because, understand, I guess she thought this was another attempt on her life. So Sean would apparently leave, didn't think nothing of it, I guess. And he went to go make rounds on other patients. Because again, there's other people. And I gotta go check on these other people. He comes back 2 hours later, see how May's doing. She's dead. Fingertips blue, face is pale. So the next day, so they're not even like putting gaps in between these murders anymore. They are apparently aware of a Bale Buckhard, who apparently was like 76, suffering from seizures. Apparently was born March 10th, 1912, and had like 10 siblings. So then apparently she would move to a city called St. Joseph, and this is where she meets her husband, Ernest Dorto. They proceed to have a daughter together named Nancy. Ernest was sadly died in 1961, so she's also a widow. And she lived alone until 1979. So then Bale gets diagnosed with hardening of the arteries, arthritis, and organic brain syndrome. And so then Bale apparently had bruises on her face and left cheek, and it was just, and like they basically wrote it down as like she must have just hit herself with the railing on the bed. On February 26th, Kathy decides, I guess, like to offer, like, hey, I'll look over the other patients while y'all on break, say what y'all gotta do when y'all come back. And I guess they was cool with it, because, that's less work for them. So she goes, you can imagine, goes and pretty much kills Bale. Bale is found with her arm underneath her, and this arm was severely bruised. And then her cause of death was put down as a heart attack, despite recently having an exam, and apparently her exam also said that she was in good health. So then in April, we're now in April, 1987, apparently there was a nurse that would come in through the back door, and she would ask to speak to the director, because like, hey, can I get some time off? Apparently she had a black eye, arm in a sling, a black eye, arm in a sling, like when your arm is broken, and a broken rib. Of course, she gets asked, like, what happened? She says it was a car accident, but apparently it would later come out that apparently Kathy had invited her into the woods for some sex, because, the 80s was a different time, and apparently Gwen and most of the staff was there too, and apparently Gwen beat her up in front of most of the staff there. So then, of course, she gets questioned about it. She denies it. The nurses would later go on to complain about Kathy and Gwen. Kathy apparently is separated from these other nurses and actually given a promotion, and Gwen apparently felt that she deserved it more, because Gwen apparently had been working there longer. So at this point, at least I thought Kathy and Gwen were being exclusive. Apparently Kathy would catch Gwen cheating on her with a 21-year-old nurse named Heather. She apparently gets physically abusive, and Gwen decides this is where we're going to leave, because, now we're going to put hands on each other. And so then Gwen moves into this trailer with Heather. Kathy finds out and somehow gets Gwen to come back to her trailer, I guess, like, to talk, and Gwen comes back. And supposedly, because the story is mixed depending on who you ask, apparently Kathy would tie Gwen up, hold her at gunpoint, and even put a gun up to her vagina saying, your head will get blown off if you ever leave me again. Whereas Kathy will say that, whereas Kathy has since went on an interview and say, oh, Gwen actually did that to me. So if it actually happened and who did it to each other, we don't even know. But apparently it happened. So she was left tied up for like 3 hours. I guess I would like to assume that Kathy eventually let her down. She eventually, of course, leaves and gets Heather and immediately leaves Michigan and goes straight to Texas. So apparently that happened in July. So now we're in July 1987. Gwen apparently started working at a children's hospital. Apparently she had heard all the way, they're in Texas, and like I said, this takes place in Michigan. So apparently she had heard all the way back in Texas that one of the victims' families wanted an autopsy, which apparently that wasn't true. So then she threatens Kathy and is like, look, if I go down, you going down? So then Kathy at this point decides, we're going to tell Kenneth everything that happened. And then she decides to tell him about Edith Cole, which Edith Cole was a 97-year-old woman, so she's the oldest of all the confirmed victims, and she was born November 28th, 1889. So then she marries this guy named George. Apparently they get married in like 1913. I don't know if she couldn't have a child like biologically or what was going on, but they decided to adopt a kid, as many people do. Fortunately, that child apparently died at 14 months. So they decided to open up a restaurant in 1939, and George would die literally the next year in 1940. Edith, just like pretty much all our other couples, they're widows essentially. She runs the restaurant pretty much by herself until like she decides we're gonna sell it sometime because I'm getting too old for this. In 1985, she apparently gets diagnosed with breast cancer, but luckily it didn't spread. And then, unlike our other victims, she actually put herself into the nursing home when she was 92. I guess she didn't have any children to look after her, and she's a widow, and I'm in my last years, might as well just go ahead and do it. So, that's how Edith got there. The other murders, they would have other nurses go find them, instead of like causing suspicion, like, oh, you just happen to find like all these dead people. However, with Edith, Kathy was actually the one who reported her dead, instead of just, yeah. So then Kenneth, I guess, is trying to give his ex-wife over her the benefit of the doubt. Was at least a mercy killing, because these women did have Alzheimer's. They were in their elder years. Were you just trying to put them out of misery? That way, I guess, so you're not exactly looking all that cruel. And Kathy's like, yeah, no, we did that shit for entertainment. And even apparently made Gwen look the mastermind. So then Kenneth, for whatever reason, keeps his mouth shut for like a whole ass year, until eventually something just tells him, I gotta go to the police station. And so he goes to police, tells them all what Kathy has told them. And Kathy is obviously brought in. She's questioned. She confesses. Again, makes Gwen look the mastermind. So then luckily, despite this being 1987, luckily the nursing home did keep files of every patient that had died. So they started looking at the spree, during the murder spree, to confirm if all these victims were actual murder victims, and to see if there's any more like additional potential victims that y'all ain't mentioned yet. So then Gwen gets arrested for some bad checks that she had wrote like years prior, because at this time there was no physical evidence tying her to any murders, but we're going to arrest you on something. So they decided to use the bad checks since we have no evidence of murder yet. So of course Gwen pretty much denies involvement like right away, and apparently she takes polygraph tests, which aren't like accurate, but her results come back inconclusive. Kathy apparently also took a polygraph test, and I didn't see what her results were. But I feel like if she would have failed, it would have said so. Marguerite and Edith, they're the only ones that could be like dug up, because all the other victims had been cremated. So obviously if they're cremated, there's like no physical evidence we can get from that. So luckily, the two families decided not to cremate their loved ones. So good for them on that. Apparently they were able to test the heart post-mortem and see that their deaths weren't heart attacks. So then by this point, apparently Gwen and Heather had apparently fled. They were caught at a stoplight. Gwen is held on $1 million bond. I assume Heather wasn't arrested, even though you're technically fleeing with a fugitive. Now, whether Heather knew whether or not her girlfriend was a serial killer, at the time at least, I don't know. Kathy would be rearrested hours later. So then Kathy, because you always got a plea deal in these stories, Kathy decides, we're going to testify against Gwen in order to not get life in prison. Because obviously you kill multiple people, you're asked to get life in prison. But she's like, I'll testify against her to not get it. So instead she gets charged with 1 count of second-degree murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit. So Gwen's defense team apparently will try to just discredit anything that Kathy said, because there's no physical evidence, and apparently Kathy was known to be a liar. Of course, Kathy, remember I said with the gun story in the vagina? Kathy, of course, on the stand will try to say that Gwen actually did that to her. Gwen was sentenced to life without parole, and Kathy was sentenced to 20 to 40 years. So then in 1990, the Alpine Manor gets shut down, because I guess like people didn't want to stay there anymore. Business kind of like went bust after these serial killers were killing the elderly, and understandably. And in 2020, Kathy actually got released after being denied parole 8 times. And so yeah, with that being said, that's all I have for the nursing home murders, the Scrabble murders, whatever you want to call them. If you knew this case, definitely know what you think down below. Would you ever put your family in a nursing home after listening to this case? Or do you have any family members that are in a nursing home? If you do, definitely go check on them. So with that being said, that's all I have for this case. I cover fatal females 3 times every Friday. Subscribe for more fatal females, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.